But that's the thing. That's what being lean can do. Because, I mean, some would think that on the right, you're like 210 pounds or 200 pounds.
Pictures by myself. Yeah, if you saw that, you're like, that dude looks like he's 200 pounds.
Yeah.
Did you read something in a magazine? Like, I'm going to do these 3 sets of 10? Or?
Yeah, that was just it. It was Muscle and Fitness. You know, they had Lee Haney, Barry DeMay, those types of guys. How you tracking macros? I'm like, what's macros? Like,
it's so great that someone like decided that cardio's bad, you know? Like, and I love that. I love that like a bunch of guys got together one day and like, you know what? This seems like a waste of time. It's boring.
Yeah.
What is something that would chew up somebody's muscle? Because there is the concern over doing cardio, but it's not the cardio, right? It would be being in like a large caloric deficit or something like that, right?
Yeah. I mean, that's part of the game, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's not even extreme level conditioning because I got leaner than that like a couple months later. But I mean, yeah, you get that lean, hormones are going to tank out. You know, I have to eat
broccoli flying everywhere, chicken breast.
6 o'clock, 8:30, 11, 2:30, like on the clock. Oh shit. If I don't eat in the next 5 minutes, I'm going to atrophy.
Anabolic window.
Yeah, we had an anabolic window.
That's real, bro.
Tell the guys in prison. I mean, they get slopped for meals, but they're fucking jacked, right?
You can go in there and do a lateral raise, and you can do it just like the guy next to you, but the guy next to you might be like really thinking about it. He might be thinking about how all those muscle fibers are firing, and he's squeezing them up. Like it could be so vastly different.
And we need to, we want to be relatable to people and not make it seem like, oh, okay, yeah, this guy on the right, look at him, he's freaking jacked. He does things perfectly. That wasn't perfect. The reason that's like that is because of all the years before that, all the success and failures I went through. So I think that's not talked about enough.
PowerProject family, I hope you guys are doing well today. I want to give you guys a quick piece of fitness equipment lifting history. The hip circle that you see before you is actually the first hip circle ever. All right, there were no booty bands before the hip circle, which is pretty interesting. That's why you see it in gyms like The Rock. We've seen Kim K using it on Instagram. It is the OG, but that's also why we have the slingshots, gangster wraps, knee sleeves, elbow sleeves, everything that you're going to need in the gym so that you can protect yourself before you wreck yourself. So, Andrew, you tell the people how to get it.
Yeah, you guys got to head over to markbellslingshot.com, load up a hip circle, some elbow sleeves, some knee sleeves, all up in your cart, and you guys can use promo code PowerProject to save 15% off all of it. Again, markbellslingshot.com, links to them down in the description as well as the podcast show notes.
Did you eat anything today?
I had a shake and some granola bars.
Throw down a protein shake. How do you normally eat? Like, what's your breakfast normally consist of?
90% of the times, like egg whites with some string cheese, cereal, or toast or something like that. Today I was on the run because I had to come here and shave and look presentable.
You shave everything?
So protein shakes a lot faster.
Shave head to toe? Just like one big...
Just for you guys, I look sexy,
Dog, for my first ever...
It's a big deal.
For my first ever bodybuilding show, I thought you had to shave everything. I didn't realize that you didn't have to shave your armpits. So I shaved everything, and because I didn't want to take something to my armpits, I had my ex, she waxed my armpits. I still have video of it where her mother put hot wax on my hair and ripped it off. And it didn't even all come off.
I think you just wanted that, though.
Maybe, but...
You have to shave everything.
Do you shave your armpits before a show?
Front double bicep, you want your hair to be showing?
I guess you're right.
It depends on what your armpit situation looks like, I guess. You know? Like if it's crazy in there, then you got to do something.
I've seen, where you should definitely shave. Yeah. People didn't shave, and you're like, you need to go backstage and shave before you do your posing routine.
You're like, this isn't the
big old bush.
Yeah, this isn't the 1970s. This isn't the Mike Menser era. Go clean some of that up. So the reason why we have you on the show today is Nsima over here has been claiming that he's natty for a really long time. And I think you've known him for a long time. So out of all the analysis, all the tests, the urine test, the blood test, you put him in that giant machine. We appreciate that. Thank you so much. It didn't look like he was going to fit. What is the verdict?
Oh, he's definitely clean.
Oh, shit. Really?
I paid him to say that.
That's what I was telling him before the podcast even started. I said, you came out the womb big.
That's right. He did. I think he did. He's always been big. And he has a hell of an appetite.
I do. But no, it's fun. I'd imagine, Jeff, because the cool thing about you, man, how old are you now?
I'm 50.
You're 50. The reason why it's so cool to have you here, dog, is because like you have pictures of this on your Instagram. of like, you've been lifting all your life, and we'll get into that. But you have this transformation picture from 35 to 48 years old. And you can see, you were still competing then, and you can see the thickness in the legs, the thickness all around your body. You got bigger. And a lot of people are out here on the internet saying, you know, after 30, men who are lifting, you're not going to be able to gain that much new muscle, blah, blah, blah. But you are literally the definition of consistency when it comes to lifting and what that can give an athlete, because you've been making progress. And it doesn't, I don't know, do you think it's slowing down? I mean, it's slowing down, but do you think you're stopping?
I mean, I don't look stopped yet, right?
Yeah.
I think it's definitely slowing, but I think you hit the nail on the head when you said consistency. Like a lot of times when we get older, we kind of lose habits. It's the habits that deteriorate us, not so much like all of a sudden magically our hormones are going down the toilet. So I think the consistency is huge.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not perfect. I've had moments where, you know, I wasn't as consistent. And that could be with more so like dieting. But the training itself, like I've literally been in the gym 35, 36 years with minimal time away. Like probably the most time away I've seen was maybe 4 months. And that wasn't by choice. Well, kind of by choice. That was more so, oh, look at that bald head. That looks sexy.
People are going to say drugs to this, man. How much do you weigh here in both pictures, by the way?
Take a wild guess.
Picture number 2 at 48, I'm going to guess 180. And then the first picture, I'm going to guess 172.
Bless your heart. 170 on the right, 156 on the left.
Oh, wow. But that's the thing. That's what being lean can do. Because, I mean, a normal person, because I know you and I see you standing here, some would think that on the right, you're like 210 pounds or 200 pounds.
Pictures
Easily.
by myself. Yeah. If you saw that, you'd be like, that dude looks like he's 200 pounds.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's crazy.
How'd you get into bodybuilding in the first place? What spawned your interest?
I started lifting weights in 8th grade. More so because family life, like my mom, my stepdad, it was a little bit of a rough go for me, a big transition to go, you know, into that household. So that was kind of my escape, was the plastic weights, you know, the old sand-filled plastic weights. Pulled that down from the garage rafters my stepdad had up there. He never used it. So I'm like, I'll just throw that in my room, get home from school, and I would just basically go in my room and lock myself in there and lift just to kind of get away from the environment. And then I kind of enjoyed like seeing the results of it. Like, oh, these little muscles are kind of popping up. And then, of course, you know, in school, you know, I was kind of like the only guy lifting. So I was like, oh, that kid, he's pretty jacked. So, you know, I kind of got into that. And then I kind of built an ego because I was the big fish in little pond. So all through high school, I was like the jack guy. And then actually competing, I had no desire to do that. I'm like, there's no way I'm getting in these little underwear and getting up there. Cause I'm an introvert, man. Just like being here, this is crazy to me. But, you know, I've learned to get out of my comfort zones. So my ex-wife is like, you can do it. Just get up there. And so I did. And then, I mean, the rest is history. I haven't looked back. So we're talking like early 90s when I first started competing.
Those old school weights for people that, you know, have the liberty to have all the nice stuff of today. The shit was dangerous, man. Like those old school benches, those were fucked. And like when you went to put the weight back, you had to be really careful because you could easily go way over top. And like separate your shoulder or worse, or just kill yourself. And the bench itself, like over a period of time, it would like get real shady.
It was wobbly. Like, I mean, yeah.
It's got a leg extension on one side and you can bench off the other.
Was that the shit like an Unbreakable with Bruce
Yeah,
Willis?
absolutely.
Yes. Okay, that's what I was thinking
It's just like that.
But like even the weights were wobbly because like they were like filled, right? So like they could get super lopsided. Like, oh my gosh, this is dangerous.
Yeah, they would make noise when you lifted. You're like,
it almost seemed like the bar itself was like plastic. That's what it felt like.
Yeah.
We have all these tins stacked
I never even
out.
thought about that, but you're right. The bar was like a PVC pipe.
It was a piece of shit, basically. Yeah.
And I never thought to myself, this thing's going to snap one day.
But it was awesome because there was no social media, no internet. Just go in my room, have Lee Haney's picture up on the wall, and train. you know, and I had no clue what I was doing. I
was gonna say, how long did it take you to like start to figure out? Like, I know, like in retrospect from now, you probably still don't think you know much because there's always so much more to learn, right? Mm-hmm. But when you were just starting out, sounds like you just kind of started. And when you just started, like, what were you doing? What were you kind of messing around with? Did you read something in a magazine like, I'm gonna do these 3 sets of 10? Or
yeah, that was just it. It was Muscle and Fitness. You know, they had Lee Haney, Barry DeMay, those types of guys. I remember doing bench press, overhead press, an overhead tricep extension, and a barbell curl. That was it.
Put it all on repeat.
Yeah, repeat every day. And then once I got into high school, then it became like an ego thing, like how much can I bench? So I remember bench pressing Monday, Wednesday, and Fridays, and we max every Friday.
This is getting exciting. I'm listening.
Like none of the football coaches had any idea.
What about Saturday, Sunday? Any benching on Saturday, Sunday?
No, because I didn't have any gym. I didn't have equipment. Yeah, because at that time when I got into high school, I had moved out of my house. I was living with my uncle, so we didn't really have any. I didn't have the plastic weight set there. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it was just mainly just for PE. I would train.
What about the nutrition side of it? Have you always kind of been a leaner person, or was that something that you had to really focus in on right off the bat?
I was athletic as a kid. I wouldn't say I was super lean like when I started training, but I was lean enough to where once I started training, you can actually see results because of the muscle development. But I didn't really dabble into nutrition, like actually educating myself until like I was in my early 20s when I started competing. Mm-hmm. And it actually made things worse because prior to that, I was just eating mom's cooking or my aunt's cooking or whatever. So I wasn't really paying attention to what my calories were. I was just making sure I was eating a lot. And then once I got into nutrition, like trying to figure it out, I actually was starting to undereat. So I actually regressed. So it actually was counterproductive actually trying to learn, but I didn't like get better at it until like my late 20s. So it was like a good 10-year stretch where it was almost like my physique wasn't where it should be. But at the same time, because of the talent level that I was competing against, I thought I was doing something right because I was winning shows. I was like winning divisions and things like that. So I'm like, okay, I must be doing something right. And I think because I was growing, the way I grew up and learning on my own and being an introvert, it was hard for me to actually ask people for help.
So you were coaching yourself through these shows, or you had a coach?
What's a coach? Back in the 90s?
Yeah.
Really? Yeah. No, that wasn't a thing.
Mm-hmm. So let me ask you this. When you were, because you said like your early 20s until your late 20s, you think you regressed. Were you kind of hitting the stage around like the same weight, same physique? What would like, and you weren't noticing?
I mean,
much?
I would improve, but it wasn't like that, what you just seen. It was just like, okay, you look a little bit bigger, but you don't look any leaner.
And it's partially because, was a big reason because you were under eating for a lot of that?
I was under eating while competing.
Yeah.
Like just like losing weight too fast. Like the rate of loss was too fast. You know how it is when you're younger, ego, you're like, you want to get after it, right?
Yeah.
Like everything has to be hardcore.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd pay more attention to the scale, let's say, than what I was looking like.
Yeah.
So it's like, I was chasing these numbers. I got to lose my 2 pounds a week or whatever. Uh-huh. And not have any like idea as far as like, hey, I should be looking a certain way.
Yeah. We were actually talking
also
about this.
too, like the education level back then or the knowledge that was available isn't like it is now.
Yeah.
So it was mainly like, I'm trying to learn from these guys, these IFPA pros in the magazines. But yet I'm a natural bodybuilder without the internet. Mm-hmm. So I'm like just looking at them like, okay, how do I do this? And I remember like reading a Sean Ray article, like he didn't track anything. He just eyeballed it. I'm like, okay,
yeah,
let me do that.
How long did it take you to realize that they were doing things differently? Like, did you know when you were early 20s and you just made a choice not to hop on? Or were you following because you're like, did you know that they were taking steroids to be able to get those physiques? Or?
No, I knew that.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not that dumb.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So my ex-wife, she would be like, she'd get frustrated with me. She's like, why are you doing these shows? You know you're not going to win. Like I would do well and win classes, but never overalls. Like, why are you doing this when you know you're not going to win? You know you're never going to go that route. Because just that's how I was raised. Like, don't drink, don't smoke, don't do anything. So I've always kind of just been, away from that.
Yeah.
And not to say, I don't judge people to do it. It's just for me personally, this is the path that I wanted to take. So yeah, it was just like, it took me a long time to actually find someone who actually was doing the natural bodybuilding side of things, because it's a totally different approach.
It's really interesting to think back too, because the steroids weren't always a Scheduled 3 drug, and I think that you probably, your beginning of your bodybuilding career probably started like right around the same time it started to become a Scheduled 3 drug. So there was like steroids. I think people think that steroids weren't really prominent, and they were really rampant. And for many, many years, people would really talk about them really openly, and they would hand them out to each other in gyms and stuff, because it wasn't illegal.
Was it more prevalent in the 80s or 90s that it was like that?
It was probably more like late 80s, kind of the early 90s. And as I'm saying, like, as you were getting into it. So, but the point of that is that there would still be a lot of guys that were already using, that were already competing when they weren't necessarily a Scheduled 3 drug. So it's it's just like an interesting time period, and to kind of think back of some of those guys, and then even Arnold and Lee Haney and some of these people. I mean, who knows how much they use? Like, no one knows any of that information really, but it just it's not as drastic as what you see going on today. And so I think in today's world, where you have people taking these like giant stacks, where they're taking 5 to 7 things at a time, that is way different than what you're asking your body to do as a natural competitor.
Yeah. 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 It was just, again, my personality was kind of like, at the time, I just figured that was like, that's bad. Like, that's more so like how I was brought up. Drugs are bad, whatever bad. So it's just more of a being immoral, maybe.
Right.
So that was just not my thing. And then, of course, I've gotten educated over the years about it. So, like I said, it's not that I'm judgmental towards people that do it. I mean, everybody's going to do their own thing, but this was just the path that I chose. And it wasn't until I met Bob Bell. I think you guys probably know Bob Bell. And at the time, he was the promoter of the capital city here in Sacramento. And he was a judge, and I was going to be doing a show in Oregon that he was going to be judging. And he called me up about 6 weeks away from. He's like, "Hey Jeff, what are you doing? Tell me what you're kind of doing to get ready for the show." And I kind of was just telling him like the same things I've been doing for like the last 10 years. Just really bro and really basic and simple. And he's like, "Hey, let's maybe implement some cardio," because cardio for me, the way I was brought up. And I got brought up in Bob's gym in Fremont. Ed Corney used to go there. Like a lot of old timers, like cardio's bad. You're going to eat your muscle up if you do cardio. So I was always anti-cardio. And he's like, Bob's like, "Hey, let's introduce some cardio in there. How you tracking macros?" I'm like, what's macros? Like,
it's so great that someone like decided that cardio's bad, And I love that. I love that. Like a bunch of guys got together one day and like, you know what? Fuck this. This seems like a waste of time. It's boring.
Yeah. Hey, it's good for your heart. It's bad for you. Okay.
Right.
But at the time, you're young, you don't know any better, so you're kind of just listening to the people that have done it before you. And you look at Ed Corney, and you're like, okay, fuck, this guy was jacked. He's trained with Arnold and all them. So, and he's the head judge of the show I compete at. So I'm going to listen to him because he was kind of my authority at the time. So, Bob Bell kind of just opened my eyes, and it was like maybe a 30-minute phone call on and I was just like, walls were up, because it almost feels like someone's attacking you, right? Questioning how you're doing things, and you're like, "No, man, I've been doing this for like this long. I've won these class titles, these divisions." But he's like, "Hey, if you want to turn pro in the natural federations," he's like, you got to change some of these approaches. So, cardio, hey, let's track some macros. That's some just, don't cut your water. Don't cut sodium, just some simple principles there. And I don't know what it was, but after listening to him for a little bit, I'm like, can't hurt to try. So I was like, let me try this out. And 6 weeks later, I got to the show, and it was best ever physique I put to that point. Like the size, the conditioning, I was like, oh, wow, that's a different level that I've never seen before. And I was one guy away from winning. The guy that won, he was 30 pounds heavier than me, same height. Yeah. And I was like, I remember in the elevator, my ex-wife's like, is that guy competing? I'm like, nah. I go, he's probably just helping out. Because, in my mind, I've never seen anybody like that. So I'm like, this guy must be using. There's no way he's in this natural show.
Yeah.
Shit, I get backstage. There he is, no clothes on. I'm like, oh shit, game over. Yeah. But he ended up going to Worlds. He took second at Worlds. And he was legit.
What is something that would chew up somebody's muscle? Because there is the concern over doing cardio, but it's not the cardio, right? It would be being in like a large caloric deficit or something like that, right?
Yeah. Like the picture earlier, the one at 156 at 35, that was like losing, the rate of loss was like way too fast, like more than 1% of my body weight per week for successive weeks. And there was no refeeds, no moments where you're eating more food. Training was hardcore. Like back then it was, mincers, high intensity. I was balls to the wall. So being in a severe deficit, training with that much intensity, and let's not forget to mention like lifestyle. Like at that time I was working in an auto plant. I was working
People forget that
40 to 50 hours a week, commuting 3 hours a day because I would go from out in the valley out here to the Bay Area every single day, getting about 5 or 6 hours sleep per night. And I used to think I was lazy. And I'm like, fuck. Now I look back and I go, no, I wasn't lazy. I was just tired.
Yeah.
So just running myself into the ground. So I don't think it was the fact that, hey, I gained 14, 15 pounds of muscle from 35 to 48. A lot of that, I learned how to retain it a lot better. So the approaches were a little bit wiser, more conservative.
Yeah. Let me ask you this. The rate of cuts, because we were actually recently talking about this in a prior podcast. How many weeks... Well, I mean, how many weeks would you give yourself to cut back then versus now? And also now you're probably actually starting at a better body composition when you start your cut too, right?
That's the goal. That's always the goal. But I mean, back then it was, I had no clue as far as like pre-prep positioning. It was like, hey, eat big, get big in the off season, try to put as much size on as you can. Hey, we got 12 to 16 weeks before a show because that's kind of how it was as far as like the approaches back then, and just diet from there. So if you're 190, you need to be 160 or 156 with 12, 16 weeks or whatever. You do the math. But actually, take that back. That first picture, I dieted for about 8 or 9 months.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Okay, cool.
So that where I was starting to come into my own, that was 2006. I'm like, what would happen if I actually dieted longer? Like longer.
I was like, slower?
Not slower, but just let me live this lifestyle longer. Because up until before then, it was almost like I attained a certain level of conditioning. And then the season would be over and that would be it.
Yeah.
That, I was like, let me see what I can do if I just diet longer. Just live the lifestyle and keep dieting.
This idea of like the metabolism slowing down, like, especially if you're doing a long diet, we hear kind of people more recently been kind of talking about, like, I guess that's been around for a while, but like cheat meals or like a refeed or a diet break. Like, is your metabolism really slowing down, if you're dieting for this long a period of time? And if so, how do you counteract that?
I don't know if it's slowing down. I mean, if you're under eating and you're trying to do too much, I mean, your body's probably going to have some pushback. Like, hey, I don't want to fucking die.
Right.
So we're going to slow your you probably felt this in the scene where you feel lethargic.
Doug, yeah,
you just stop moving. So is that metabolism or just the fact that you're just underfed?
You're underfed.
So once you introduce more food, you're like, oh, I can actually move and go hunt and kill something now.
There is this idea though of like your calorie flux, right? Like it can go kind of up and down in accordance to how much you eat to help you kind of regulate your body weight somewhat, right?
I'm not the science guy, so I can't I can't break down the science of it.
Wait, what do you mean by calorie flux?
Just when you start to consume a lot of calories, there's a balance in the body of like, hey, we got more energy.
Move more.
So you might move more.
Yeah.
Your body is aware that you're getting these extra calories, and then like as you said, you felt lethargic, and then you don't want to move. So I guess, my point, just kind of bringing that up, is that, as you continue to bring those calories down, for this long diet period, I think you said how long, 8 months or something like that?
8 or 9, yeah.
Like, is that, like, I guess, it seems like a good strategy. It seemed like it's worked for you many times. But is there anything that you feel like during that process you have to counteract, or you just have to make sure the entire time that you don't excessively undereat?
So the difference between those two shots, again, it's like the first shot is 8 or 9 months of like hardcore dieting, like no breaks, like underfed way more. Whereas on the right, I dieted that, let's see, that was 2019. So that was over a year. Took me to get like that. But I wasn't in a deficit the entire time. So we factor in 1 or 2 refeeds a week, diet breaks every so often, date nights with the wife. Because the guy on the left would have been like, sorry, babe, we're not doing anything. The guy on the right's like, nah, we're going to have a glass of wine or 2 and we're going to have a date night.
I understand. So
it's a lifestyle on the right, different lifestyle compared to the left.
I accidentally inferred diet or prep with being in a long-term caloric deficit, but that cleared it up. Thank you. That was great.
No, you're welcome.
And that's the same thing that Alberto did with me back in 2015. Like, it wasn't that we were in a deficit for 42 weeks, you know, like we were in a deficit for a lot of that but we had like a week where we took a diet break, like during different phases of the prep. We had multiple refeed days, but a majority of it was like that. And I mean, when I was like getting that lean, my sex drive left for the last maybe 3 to 4 months of the prep. My sex drive was gone. I wish I got like testosterone levels done, because I mean, when this is something that happens to a lot of natural bodybuilders, when they prep for a long time and get really lean, have you ever had anybody like get tested before and like get their hormone levels checked? Because I had one guy that I was working with like 4 years ago. He wasn't even prepping for a show. He just wanted to get the leanest he could, and he looked insane. But when he got his levels checked, his free was like in 70 something,
Tanked.
80, tanked.
Yeah.
And we were like, dog, we need to put body fat back on.
Yeah. I mean, that's part of the game, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's not even extreme level conditioning, because I got leaner than that like a couple months later. But I mean, yeah, you get that lean, hormones are going to tank out. And a lot of times when I have had athletes that I've coached that they'll get their test done after, like right after, and I already know it's going to come back.
Yeah.
It's probably going to be low. They freak out like, oh my gosh, and I'm like, give it time, month, 2 months, 6 months, just get rechecked. Let's bring the food back up. Let's put some like you said, put some body fat back on, get back to normal. And then see if it comes back up.
And it does.
Because, doctor sees that. It's almost like, hey, something's going on there. You're not normal. So, we have to kind of get retested just to make sure, so you're not doing something maybe you don't need to do. Like, and no one wants to take medication if they don't have to.
No.
Give us some of the basics, like approximately what amount of protein do you typically recommend to somebody? I know it could really matter, like depending on where they are. But just for like, holding on a muscle, gaining some muscle, like where do you usually put the protein at? It's
context dependent, like you just kind of mentioned. You kind of look at the 1 gram per pound, kind of the general rule there. But I mean, if you have someone who's a little bit heavy, they're carrying a lot of body fat, they're not going to need that. No. Myself, I take in like 160 to 170 grams. And I weigh right now 185. So people kind of freak out on that. Like, that's not even a gram per pound. But my lean body mass is maybe 155, 160. So lean body mass, I'm still like a little over a gram per pound.
Right.
But we also have to look at, if we're dieting, like the rate of loss, I think, is probably the highest priority to look at. Because you can have 2 times the amount of protein, or you can have a gram per pound, or what have you. But if you're losing like I was on the left, you're going to get, your body's going to I'm going to take energy wherever I can get it. Fat, muscle, whatever. So I think when we're dieting, we have to really pay attention to the rate of loss. And the more conservative you are, the better you are going to hold on to size.
What are some things that you do pre and post workout? Is there anything intentional that you do? Or is it just you eat 6 meals a day type of thing?
I don't even eat 6 meals a day. Most days
You
it's
have
4.
to, bro. Like, are we
gonna
gonna
lose.
Are we gonna lose muscle mass?
That was me in the 90s. Yeah, ask my
Where's your 6-pack bag?
ask my ex-wife. She'll tell you how neurotic I was with that shit. You know, like, you know, I have to
Fucking
eat
broccoli flying everywhere. Chicken breast.
6 o'clock, 8:30, 11, 2:30, like on the clock. Oh shit! If I don't eat in the next 5 minutes, I'm gonna atrophy. You know. So yeah, a lot of those myths I kind of eliminated on my own. I think the 2014 prep I had, I was like 43 years old at the time. I was the first time prepping with a family, so it was almost like I had to be forced. You know, I couldn't do those same obsessive things as a bodybuilder. I had to let go of a lot of that. And a lot of it too, the training. Like, you know, everybody has kind of their set days they train on. If they don't train on set days, like, oh gosh, I'm going to shrink. So there was a lot of flexibility with that. Like, oh shit, I got to take my kid to the doctor. Okay, we're not training today. We'll just train tomorrow. That type of thing. Same thing with the meals. Like, okay, today's 3 meals, maybe tomorrow's 4. And yeah, long story short, I got on stage looking better than I did in that shot you're seeing there, because that was my best year. So it basically just like took away a lot of those myths. So
Have you personally noticed anything with like a post-workout drink or anything like that, or any sort of discipline that you have to like eat immediately when you're done? You know, there's this window, right? This like window of time that we need to get to. Otherwise, nothing good's going to happen.
Anabolic window.
Yeah, we got an anabolic window.
That's real, bro.
Do you
It's like, is it?
Tell the guys in prison. I mean, they get slopped for meals, but they're fucking jacked, right? Or I go back to when I was in high school as a kid. The first 2 years, I got hell. You've seen the picture. I look like a man child.
Yeah, dude.
I ate 1 meal a day. I come home from school and eat my mom's cooking, and that was it. I might have like maybe a bowl of cereal in the morning, but that was it.
Yeah.
Like my protein requirements back then, I mean, I was probably hitting maybe 100 grams. But still, you know, the training is what's driving everything. Of course, you need the nutrition there to back it up. But yeah, I think a lot of these myths, they make people neurotic. And I think that's where you see a lot of people not enjoy the bodybuilding as much. So I've learned to let go. There's a reason I'm still doing this, right? 35, 36 years later. Yeah.
3-4 meals a day normally?
Yeah, that's about the average. Yeah, 3-4 meals a day. Protein 160, 170. No, I try to be a little bro with that. Let me make sure that I'm getting, you know, good muscle protein synthesis. I'll break that up across 4 meals because it's hard to eat that much in one shot. But yeah, I try to keep it simple.
Carbs are maybe double your body weight, something like that.
When I'm dieting, they're under that. But yeah, like when I'm not dieting, yeah, they're more of my calories are coming from carbs than anything else.
Fats are maybe half your body weight.
Yeah, about that.
Something like that.
Yeah, anywhere between 40 to 60 grams on most days.
So you're still pretty rigorous with tracking though, or are you just kind of eyeballing it?
I'm rigorous now because I'm getting ready for shows. Off season, I'm human. I'm like more of the dad and the husband. Like I'm not gonna like put my food on a food scale in the off season. That's just how I've done it like since day one. Like off season, I just like, let me just eat and train. I have other things to do than to obsess on a food scale and things like that.
But also, when you're in your off season, you're paying attention to your food enough where you're not just gaining weight erratically, right? Like you're not just seeing weight on the scale go up. You're still paying attention to the food you eat, even though you're not tracking it, correct?
The big rocks, right? So, okay, let me make sure I'm getting enough protein in there.
Yeah.
That's the big rock. Okay, let me make sure because of course, we're bodybuilders trying to put on size. So, okay, let's not be in a deficit. So let's pay attention to the scale, make sure it's not going down. If it's staying the same or it's going up, we're okay. We don't want it to go up too high, obviously.
Yeah.
I'm human, off season. That's probably like my whole bodybuilding career. That's probably the one area where I probably haven't tracked enough. Let's say I've been too loose because then, you know, I'm like 205, 210 pounds. I'm like, oh, fuck, now I got to lose 40, 45 pounds. So that's why you see me dieting for a year. And I know I'm not going to diet a year straight because then I'm that obsessive, like underfed guy for weeks and weeks and weeks where, okay, I've learned to, okay, if this is the choice I'm going to make in the off season, it just means I got to start contest prep a lot sooner. So setting timelines, whether you're decently in shape or not, is like highest priority. Like the most important thing when you're starting a contest prep is establishing your timeline.
I have a question about that because we were talking about bulking the other day. when a lot of young guys think about bulking, they think about eating as much as possible, seeing the scale go up, their performance in the gym goes up, but they end up putting on a lot of body fat. What would your general guidelines be for bulking? Maybe the upper limit of body fat a person should hold, what they should be looking at in the gym as far as their performance, and potential rate of weight gain. Because especially if somebody's just focusing on the scale going up all the time rather than focusing on progressing in the gym and that metric, they could just be putting on more body fat week by week rather than actually gaining muscle.
Yeah, and we're talking about because I'm only experienced with naturals. So, I mean, we're not going to gain a pound of muscle a month. Like, you're going to gain maybe, like if you've been lifting for a while, like you're lucky to gain 1 or 2 pounds a year.
But if you bulk real hard and eat pizza, right?
No, I've done that. Yeah.
It doesn't work?
You think you're gaining big because like he said, like you eat the pizza, you're like, hour later, you're like, fuck, I'm swollen, right? And then you go in the gym and you're like, holy shit, I just threw up some good numbers. So you're like, hey, that must be the reason why I'm doing so good. So I'm going to keep going. And before you know it, you're like 50 pounds over.
And it takes you a year to get in shape. I think a lot of people don't recognize how much time food costs us. We had someone who was an avid carnivore eater yesterday on our show. And I think like what she did is she escaped all the food traps. She got away from a lot of them, which sounds like it would be very difficult and to kind of live a life where you're celebrating stuff with family, holidays, anniversaries, birthdays, stuff like that. So it seems like a path that is going to be very rare for someone to be able to travel down. But our food costs us a lot of time. Like when you're eating and you decide that you're going to overeat, or you decide that you're going to make a choice to not eat the way you normally do, and you're going to end up with an abundance of calories, your ass is going to be on the treadmill. Your ass is going to be out for a walk. You're going to be running. And that's not to say not to do those things, but it will cost you time. And I think that people don't like to typically waste a lot of time. I mean, we do on social media and stuff like that. There's some spots in our life but that's like a form of entertainment, And so I think if people looked at it as like a little bit more time management, they might apply a little bit more to it.
Yeah.
Because taking a whole year to like come back down in body weight is probably really hard. And then also, are you any bigger for it in the long run anyway?
Yeah, there's like a fine line. You get to a certain level, you're like, okay, if I take it, it's like going off a cliff. Like, okay, shit, I just overate. Now I'm going off a cliff. Now I got to climb back up. And that's me. Like, that's my story. Is like off season, I always get, and every time I say I'm not going to let myself get too heavy. But the reason that happens is not like, I don't think of it like you're thinking of it at that particular point in time. It's more like my son wants to go have some ice cream. So I'm like, am I really going to like worry so much about my bodybuilding side of things in those moments? And for me, I think that's the reason why I've had longevity personally. Like, my approach is just the fact that I learned to let go of the competitive side of the sport.
Does your son really want to go have ice cream?
Are you dropping hints? Like, ooh, it's hot today.
You want to go get some ice cream? He's like,
I don't think he's saying, hey, Dad, let's go get an apple.
Right. Yeah. Let's have some rice cakes, Dad.
Yeah. With so you said, you mentioned longevity. We've been having a lot of like movement people on the show. We've been Nsima's always been real bendy and paid attention to that. Mark and I have just started recently paying attention to that sort of thing and trying to progress that way, because I mean, I haven't had like a long career lifting or anything, nowhere near Mark. Mark has done a lot of shit, and he will say that he's been pretty stiff for a long time, and now he's trying to like unstuck himself. And then again, like the more people that we're kind of looking into, it's like, oh, these are different, like, movements that maybe we should try doing that. Maybe we should try being more, what's like with kettlebells, like functional fitness type stuff.
Yeah.
But for yourself, you've been, I know functional. I didn't mean to drop that in there, but for yourself, you've been bodybuilding for a long time, but you look like you're in amazing shape, like health wise is what I mean. Are you like stuck anywhere? Do you have any like aches or pains, or can you I mean, but
I'm 50. Yeah, we hurt.
Right. But like your back doesn't hurt, like when you get out of bed, like that sort of thing. Like how is your body holding up all these years?
No, I experience everything you just said.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
I think
joints hurt here and there, stuff like that.
Yeah, my shoulders, my lower back. I actually strained it the other day, picking up my son's shoe off the floor.
Oh shit!
So
I know that.
Kind of mad he didn't clean up after himself.
And then,
so
man, he's just
It's his fault.
So I mean,
he has it out for you.
I can RDL like 365, 375 on the normal. Pick up a pair of shoes and I hurt my back.
Yep.
Go figure. Yeah.
I know the pain.
No, but yeah, I mean, it's where I think for me it's more wear and tear. I mean, you're 50, training 35 years pretty consistently. You can't expect like everything's gonna feel great all the time. So for me, the reason I think I've lasted so long and continuing to keep moving forward with it is just it's more mental and learning how to pace my training. Because let's face it, if I'm fucking doing 500-pound deadlifts week in and week out and I'm gonna foam roll, like that's gonna cure my aches and pains. Like, no, let's go to the root cause. Why do you have the pains in the first place? Like, maybe you shouldn't be deadlifting 500. Maybe you find some alternative exercises to do. That's a little more practical. So there's a lot of context you can look at. But that's the biggest thing I look at is like, how do I pace out my training? And that's something that I've learned through our team, 3D Muscle Journeys, PT, because basically he's just, kind of taught me how to balance that stuff out.
Have you found some of that like line of how much weight you need to actually use? I want to say I saw a study recently where some people were using like 30% less weight and they still had these outstanding outcomes. And then people used 60% less weight and they had the same outstanding outcomes. What have you kind of discovered for yourself? Do you like need that weight? Or is it more of like more the mental component? Like I've gotten into running more recently. And I know it's not a probably great idea for me to run all the time. It might not be a great idea. It might not be in my best interest of the health of my knees and joints to get like way into running but for my mind, I fucking love it. So I find myself doing it almost every single day. So with weights, do you get attached to like, it's got to be at least 3 plates on this exercise. Otherwise, it's a garbage workout.
Yeah. I mean, I got the ego every now and then. I've learned to let go of like squats and deadlifts. And I learned the hard way. Because like 2013, I think it was my off season. Like that was the most squats I've ever done in my life. Like I hit a 460. That was the most I've ever done. And I was like 42 years old at the time. And because of that and having success on the deadlift and all these big lifts, I even add 2 plate overhead. I did that like for 1 or 2 reps.
Nice.
So I got into the season in 2014 and that was my best year as a pro, winning a pro show, taking 4th at Worlds. So in my mind, it was like, okay, and my physique kind of resembled some of those loads. Like, okay, I'm seeing some change there I've never seen before. Got success. That season was over. Hey, let's head back into the off season. Let's just keep rinse and repeating that. Well, your body can only handle so much. You've repetitive use. I started getting lower back strains. I probably had 3 in 1 year. So I had a lower back strain, rehab it, get back under the bar, get the squat back up over 4 plates. Cool. Got that. And then it happened again. So like going through that like 3 times, I was like, why am I beating my head against a brick wall here? So let me find different exercises, different alternatives to try to keep my longevity going. So I was like, leg press, hack squats, leg extensions, obviously not as heavy as the loads, but hey, my muscle mass is still there. So I know these things, like you could look at the research and go, okay, you can lift 30% of your 1RM and take it to failure. Your muscle isn't going to go anywhere. But mentally, like you're going to go from lifting 400 pounds and I'm going way down here. It's hard to let go of that. So I think a lot of people struggle with that.
What about something like, just trying to recreate something similar? So hypothetically, you do a set of leg press or leg extension and you go right into the squat and now you end up using quite a bit less weight. Instead of 405, maybe you have 275 on there. Have you done stuff like that?
Yeah. Like
really...
if I'm dropping loads down like quite a bit, then I'm going to make sure that the intensity level, meaning how close to failure I'm getting, is definitely elevated. Because obviously, if you're lifting 400 pounds, you can be further away from failure versus 200 pounds if you're doing the same number of reps.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's a different style of training too. Like for me to go from like doing 6 reps on something, now I got to do 20, and then you have to question like, well, how close are you really getting to failure at 20? Because is it you're tapping out because there's just a lot of lactic acid there, and you're kind of just being a puss now, and you're shortchanging yourself. So yeah, it takes time to kind of adapt to that style.
When it comes to training, Jeff, everyone talks about progressive overload, and increasing volume over years and years and years. But
I know where you're going with this.
you can't always lift heavier. You can't always keep doing more volume year by year like that. And it's like, if that's what people expect so they can keep gaining muscle, how are you going to continue doing that? So you have actually continued to make progress over the years. When looking at what people talk about when it comes to progressive overload, what do you think people are getting wrong? Like, how do you handle your training to keep making progress and keep progressing and still gaining muscle, but you're not always increasing your training volume? At least that's my assumption. Maybe I'm wrong.
No, I don't think you're wrong.
Okay.
Like most people want to quantify, right? They quantify through numbers.
Yes.
You guys have been training a long time too. Like you guys know you can't just add a set year after year after year. Otherwise, I'd be doing like 50 sets for one exercise, and then I got 6 more to do after that. It's like, it doesn't work that way.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you guys know too, you guys are experienced. Like think back to when you guys first started training, like where your intensity and effort level was at. Like you're going to expect someone who walks into the gym in their first year to go to like close to failure or learn like really good form in their first year. So I think as we get advanced, we're more skilled.
Mm-hmm.
We're more skilled with form. We're more skilled with intent and effort. And we know how to push ourselves, like physically, mentally, and emotionally. And I don't think many people look at the skill set of bodybuilding. They just think, oh, okay. They just look at the research and the evidence and go, okay, I got to do X amount of set. I got to do 10 to 20 sets according to X, Y, and Z. But if you actually look at people train, you watch them train. That's the thing that I do as a coach. I'm like, let me see your form, not just how you're actually executing, but I want to see from start to finish where your effort level's at.
Mm-hmm.
And everything's on point with that. Because you could have the most perfect program in the world on paper, but if the execution isn't there, it's not going to get you very far.
Yeah.
I love what you said right there about skill set. I think Nsima has a really good skill set when he's training. Like he's very in tune with his body, obviously from being an athlete and stuff like that too. But in the weight room specifically, it's kind of, I consider it to be like a form of genius in a way. When you watch people move a certain way or tap into a muscle a certain way, I think he could use a lot less weight than another individual, but be firing muscles way differently and getting like maybe even more out of it than somebody else, even though he could probably use 100 pounds more on the exercise. And then probably the most intelligent person I've ever lifted with from a skill set lifting standpoint has been Mike O'Hearn. I've never seen anything like it before in my life.
It's crazy.
And, Mike is a guy who grew up a little bit similar to myself where he was in some of these classes because he learned kind of slowly and he kind of thought he was dumb, but like the guy is a fucking genius when you work out with him. It's completely amazing to train with someone like that. And then also I've been fortunate enough to be around people like Charles Glass. And when I was younger, I was training at Gold's Gym and I was doing an exercise. Charles walked by and he was like, hey, he's like, you want me to show you how to do that the right way? Mm-hmm. And I was like, oh my God, I'd love that. Mm-hmm. And it was like a sissy squat and it totally annihilated me and it killed me. And I was like messed up for like a week. The next time he came into the gym and he walked past me and I was doing another exercise, he's like, hey, you want me to show you how to do that? I was like, no, I'm good. But there's just something special about, I mean, you can go in there and do a lateral raise and you can do it just like the guy next to you, but the guy next to you might be like really thinking about it. He might be thinking about how all those muscle fibers are firing and he's squeezing them up. Like it could be so vastly different from one person to the next.
Yeah, big time. Like online too, it's because you're not physically there with someone,
right?
So I think a lot of times, like I get this all the time, is I'll post something up and That's all the volume you do? Like I get that all the time. So my response is always, and I know in the back of my mind, like, okay, I'm 50. The person asking me is probably half my age. So they're not even, my training age is like older than they've been on planet Earth. So in my mind, I'm like, okay, that might be only 3 sets. Okay, but I've done this for 35 years. So if you think volume over time from that perspective, I've done a shit ton more volume than that person or the average person.
Mm-hmm.
But everybody kind of just looks in this little bubble, this little vacuum. So you have to look at the career.
PowerProject family, how's it going? Now, we like to look good in the gym and out of the gym. That's why you always see Mark and I and Andrew is stepping up on the short game, wearing shorts from Viore and clothes from Viore. And honestly, the number one compliment that I've seen, that I've gotten, and even Mark's gotten, is, damn, your butt looks good. And that's because, well, the clothes we wear make our booties look delicious. Andrew, how can they get it?
Yeah, you guys both have pretty big wagons. You guys can head over to viore.com/powerproject. That's VUORI.com/powerproject to receive 20% off the most amazing apparel that looks so good inside and outside of the gym.
It's going to make your ass look fat,
and your ass
like
will
that.
look fat. Links to them down in the description, as well as the podcast show notes. God damn it.
That's a good one. That's a good one. Make your ass look fat. This is another thing too. Like when people think of bodybuilding, they think that after a training session, you should be feeling a certain way. There are people that are like, I'm bodybuilding, so after a training session, I should be feeling super sore. I should be kind of trashed. But when you think about the consistency of that, you cannot replicate that for weeks and months on end. So when young guys are looking at training, I'm curious to you, how do you think that they should be feeling post-training session if they want to be able to actually gain a good amount of muscle over time and not fuck themselves up?
Well, if they take a step back, they need to take a step back and think, okay, I'm going to be doing this 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 35 years. How long have you guys been training? You've been training a while. I mean, you're
Since
young.
I was 13,
but
so like 16 years.
Yeah, 30 years or so.
I mean, you guys have probably had those sessions where it's like, I remember those sessions coming out doing legs, and I can't even drive off because my leg's shaking. I can't get the clutch to pop out,
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, I've learned to, you have to pace it out. And if you're not, the thing is recovering too. You have to recover. And I think a lot of times, a lot of people miss the boat on that because they want to do more and more and more, but they don't actually think of recovery as should be an equal part of the process. And we look at other sports. This is what frustrates me about bodybuilding is that we don't look at other sports to improve our bodybuilding. Look at baseball, starting baseball pitchers. You don't see a starting baseball pitcher pitch every game. Mm-hmm. I mean, they throw 90 to 100 miles per hour. They're throwing multiple pitches. Their arm ends up jelly after that. So to expect them to do that with the same velocity and same accuracy in the next day, it ain't going to happen. But as bodybuilders, we want to crush ourselves like that starting pitcher and go back to the gym the next day and then want to keep that performance elevating. It's just not going to happen. So that's one thing I've learned back in the old times with training like Mincer and Yates was yeah, we train freaking hard as shit. And it's probably not ideal to do that all the time. But the thing we always put a value on was recovery. So I was training every other day to maintain performance. So I think sometimes as bodybuilders, we need to think we're actually an athlete. We need to think about the performance aspect of it. How can I get more out of myself and become more efficient?
Yeah, Menser and Yates, I think, the heavy duty training, they did a lot for the recovery because even though it was intense, the overall volume was brought down, or at least it was supposed to be. Right. But you would just go and hammer one exercise and you just completely smash yourself on that one exercise.
Yeah. I trained like that for about 16, 17 years. Wow. And then after that, I met up with my crew, 3D Muscle Journey, and I got more into the science side of things and learned about, other principles of training. Mm-hmm. So now it's I kind of use a plethora of tools, depending, for example, if I'm pressed for time, okay, today's going to be a high intensity training day, low volume, high intensity, because I only have 40 minutes to train. So I'm going to get as much as I can out of this session with less. Other days I might feel fatigued and tired. Okay, I just don't want to go that hard. Let me just add a couple more sets in there and keep it a little further from failure. And I don't think there's a way we can actually say, hey, which one's better? Acutely, what's better? 2 sets of complete failure or 4 sets, 2 or 3 reps in reserve? What's better? Like, there's no way to know.
Use both.
Yeah,
Right.
there's no way to say which one's more optimal. And this is questions I've posed to like Eric Helms and all that. And yeah, no one's going to give a hard answer to it.
With the heavy duty style training, can you explain what that looked like when you were doing some of it? Because I think for people to know about it, I think would be really useful.
So the guy that introduced me to it, it was train 3 days. We're training 3 days per week. Some simple basic exercises: bench, overhead press, bent row, leg press, squat, that type of thing. But it was we did 2 sets to failure. And usually the second set, it would be like failure, then force reps, depending on the exercise, of course, safe exercises. And then after the force reps, on the last one, it would be a static hold.
Damn.
So it'd be like, okay, 2 force reps on overhead press, get okay up here. Now you're holding it and the goal wouldn't be like, let it down slow. Your thought process is keep pushing, push up the entire time as the weight's kind of coming down. So it would be like that. And that was kind of the gist of it. And then when I started doing it kind of by myself, I kind of let go of some of that a little bit. But for the most part, it was just 2 sets. Because I know Mincer was like, a lot of it was like 1 set to just complete failure. Yeah, I did.
I think sometimes he might use 2 different exercises. Like from what I remember, he might have pre-exhaust on like a leg extension or something like that, and then go right into like a squat, or maybe it was vice versa. Maybe it was squat first and leg extension. But I just remember like doing some of those workouts and just like just a crazy feeling, like feeling like your bones are bleeding or something. Like it's just hard to describe, but you're like, what? You're like, there's so much like pain going on inside this body, and you can't help but like make weird faces and make crazy noises, and you're just like, holy shit. But you know, it did get you through a workout fast. You would just warm up and then bam, you go right to it.
You're at
you're
it.
done.
Yeah. I mean, what it taught me, it taught me how to grind. Even though I'd say it's probably not ideal to train in that fashion all the time, but in my early days, it taught me how to grind. It taught me how to become efficient and how to put effort in. So nowadays, like when I'm coaching athletes, their tendency is like, oh, I got to do X amount of sets based off of, X, Y, and Z research. But I'm like, why spin your wheel doing 4 or 5 sets when your form's not where it should be, your effort level isn't where it should be. So I'm going to give you 2 sets, maybe 3, and let's improve efficiency. And if you're progressing with that, then great. We know we don't need to do 4 or 5 sets. If you're not progressing with that, okay, then, and if you're not fatigued, okay, now we add volume. Because if you're fatigued, what's the point of adding more volume? You're just going to make yourself even more fatigued. Now you're going to be that baseball pitcher throwing wild pitches all over the place because you're not recovered.
What other training concepts training concepts like that do you think would have been useful when you were in your 20s or early 30s before you started becoming more mature with the way that you train? Because like, again, you see a lot of young people training, you're like, you're not going to do that for 2 decades or 3 decades or even 5 years from now. You're going to break yourself. So what other things do you think young guys and women should be thinking about to have longevity when it comes to training?
I think it's the pace. Again, it's just the understanding that it's not, the old saying, it's not a sprint, it's a marathon.
Yeah.
And on the natural side of things, like most of the high level athletes are in their 30s, 40s, and even into their 50s. So there's definitely an aspect where you can stay on a high level for a very long time. But if you're basically shooting your wad, for lack of better terms, early on, you're not going to get to where I'm at, because you're just going to end up being banged up. So I guess what frustrates me a little bit about the longevity thing is like the question is like, I get a lot, like, what do? You foam roll, you stretch, you do all these things. Like, those are useful, but it's more about just understanding the pace, like knowing how to pace your training, knowing how to pace your diet. Like I was saying about earlier about the off season, letting my body weight go up, If I didn't do that, I would have been burnt out, because the first 3-4 years of competing, it was back to back to back, hardcore. And I finally burned out. I'm like, okay, I need to take a step back here, because my life was in shambles. After 3 competitive seasons, I was letting everything else go in my life. Marriage, work, all that stuff, finances. So it's like, fuck, I need to actually put bodybuilding aside and actually focus on real life. So that's part of longevity too, is the mental aspect. the burnout, not just physically, but also mentally and emotionally. You can get burned out on this stuff.
That's an interesting side of it that people don't talk about is what's happening personally, as well as what's going on in the gym. Because yes, we would love to get the results in the gym, but if other shit's kind of falling apart, that's not really, I guess, what we're after when we're talking about longevity. We want to be able to spin all the different plates of life simultaneously without having any of them drop, without having any of them break, and also do it kind of fluidly without it being too hectic and not having too many plates to spin.
Yeah. Another thing is enjoyment too. And I think with social media, we look at the guys to our left and right. We got to do it that way. Has to be done that way. Well, I've learned okay, I need to do it my way. I have to be basically, go after self-mastery. Because if I do that, I'm going to be able to keep going. So when it's all said and done, I want to kind of sing that song, I did it my way, So, that's the thing with social media. You look at those two pictures, if you just brought those two pictures up, and I try to put context to it when I post up, because you can look at those two pictures and go, oh yeah, look at the guy on the right, look at the guy on the left. But the guy on the right, behind the scenes, far more mature. I'm not just the physique, but just me as a human. And my life as far as being a husband and a dad and all that, I couldn't have did that the way I was approaching bodybuilding to the left. That's why I ended up getting divorced. Was part of it was bodybuilding, but just the fact that we were high school sweethearts. It's a long story, but I think a lot of times we don't see behind the curtains, and I try to express that and show people that I'm human, whether things are going really well or not going really well. I think we're all human and we all have our own story, and we need to, we want to be relatable to people and not make it seem like, oh, okay, yeah, this guy on the right, look at him, he's freaking jacked. He does things perfectly. That wasn't perfect. The reason that's like that is because of all the years before that, all the success and failures I went through. So I think that's not talked about enough.
When it comes to when's was 48 the last time you competed, or did you compete?
Yeah, that was 48. That's 2019.
2019?
Yeah.
Now at 50, with what you're seeing, and you said you're getting ready for prep again, do you think that you're going to look better than the physique you had when you were 48?
I don't know.
You don't know?
We'll see. I would love to think that. The reason I keep going, I want to improve. That's the fuel to keep me going. Whether it happens or not, I'll be okay with it one way or another, because I've learned to try to fulfill current potential. And I think, you have to be realistic with expectations. So, and I can look at elsewhere. You look at the Marshall Johnson of the world, he was one of the best natural bodybuilders on the planet in his 50s, in his mid 50s. And, I can look at guys like that. Okay, they've done it. So, hey, if they can do it, then I can do it.
You know what? Since you just mentioned Marshall Johnson, I think this is a good time to throw out some names of really good natural bodybuilders. Because I think that when people pay attention to bodybuilding, they look at a lot of the NPC guys. And a lot of these natural guys that look fucking amazing, people never see it. And because people never see it, they think that you have to be on copious amounts of drugs to get to that type of physique. So this is Marshall Johnson. How old is he?
I would say he's probably 54, 55, maybe, somewhere in there.
Mm-hmm.
When I competed against him in 2014, I was 43.
Mm-hmm.
He was, I believe, 52, 53, 54, somewhere in there.
Yep.
And I'm like, I want to be on stage with him because he's inspiring, and I kind of looked up to him. But at the same time, I want to beat him.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I want to beat this guy.
Mm-hmm.
And I did, thankfully.
Yeah.
But man, he's part of the reason why I'm still doing this at 50. I'm like, okay, he did it.
Mm-hmm.
So why can't I do it?
Yeah.
But he's an incredible physique. I think he's 6 foot, maybe 5'11".
Yep.
About 170, 175 pounds on stage. Doesn't seem very, but you look at those numbers, you're like, that's not very big. But bodybuilding is illusions.
Mm-hmm.
And the guy gets just extremely peeled.
He gets disgustingly lean.
Who else you got?
Yeah. Who else? Because we want to pull up quite a few like impressive natural bodybuilders, young or old.
So we can talk about them?
Yeah. So because like,
Just
again,
reference them. Maybe people can check them out.
people can check them out because again, I just don't think people know what people can look like with years of fucking training in natural bodybuilding. And the reason why I say that is because I see so many videos from creators on YouTube like Greg Doucette and a lot of these cats, and they're pulling people's names out. They're like, oh yeah, this person's way too lean. You can't get this lean without drugs, or you can't gain this amount of signs without drugs. And it's fucking young people's minds up. It really is, because they're like, well, if I want to do that, I have to get on something. And no judgment towards people who do use steroids. I'm not judging anybody, but I think that there is a lack of belief within a lot of young guys because of the shit that a lot of people say.
Can I share a story?
Yes.
Okay. So I was my first time going to a natural show, and that was at Cap City in 99. That was first time competing. And there was a guy backstage. Me and my brother were competing. We saw him. We're like, and in my mind, I'm like, there's no way this guy's natural. And the reason I was assuming that without even talking to this person or knowing like what the drug status, like that the test was insecurity and my own ego. I was like protecting it. Like, he looks better than me. There's no way I can look like that. So therefore he must be doing something that he shouldn't be based on these rules that we're competing here.
Yeah.
So it wasn't what that person was doing. It was more about my insecurities and my ego. And then, fast forward like 10 years later, after gaining knowledge and education and going through more experiences, I surpassed that guy by leaps and bounds. So I feel like an ass for even, it's basically calling this guy. I didn't tell him in person, hey, you're doing something. It's just in my mind, I'm calling him out.
Yeah.
And it's like, I think that's, people just have to have an open mind. And what I should have did was like, hey, my name's Jeff. And hey, how did you get that lean? Or what was your training like? What was your nutrition like? What did you do to get that way? So instead of like trying to learn, it was almost like walls are up.
Yeah.
I think that happens a lot online.
Oh yeah. Easily.
But if you think about too, like the different parts of the world, cultures are different and things like that. And your surroundings, right? Like, cause I've coached athletes where they tell me like, hey, no one knows about natural bodybuilding at all. It's all the other side. So that's the only information they're getting. So when they see someone like myself or someone like you, they're just like, hey, he must be doing something.
Yeah. Yeah.
Brian Whitaker, throw him up.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I remember seeing him at Worlds in 2015.
Is our boy Alberto Nunez still competing?
He's getting ready. This year.
Yeah.
Yeah, he looks big.
He's made some improvements. So they talked about like having like gaining weight in the off season. So for me personally, I think he always kept himself a little too lean in the off season. And I remember telling him back in the day, you need to let your body weight creep up. And he's like, no, man, got to keep it lean or whatever. And yeah, he's had like an extended off season, a little bit heavier, not to the point where it's like too fluffy.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we're seeing the results of that now.
This is Brian Whitaker.
Damn.
So yeah, what do you think he competes at? Body weight.
I don't know, 175, 180?
It's like 160.
Really?
Yeah, I think he's like 5'8", 5'9", 160. So I mean, you think of those numbers too,
The
right?
arms look big. Like it looks like the arms of a 200-pound person.
So I've seen him in person, and when you see him, you're like, does he lift? Because in t-shirts, you just. And I get that too. Like when I'm totally in shape, if I'm wearing like a normal, like a little bit less, a little baggier t-shirt, I look just like athletic. Hey, he's athletic. But you take the shirt off, then you're like, whoa. So a lot of it's illusion. But yeah, not the biggest guys in the world, but I mean, look at the symmetry, the proportions, the conditioning, even the posing. Like, okay, it's the most muscular, easy pose to hit, but I mean, it's flawless. Like, look at the thumbs. They're perfectly together. Yeah. Shoulders are perfectly lined up. So a lot of times presentation can make world of difference. And trust me, he's emailed me and said, hey, Jeff, what do you think of my posing? What I need to work on? So that guy, to perfect his craft, he has a certain circle he goes to. He'll go like Lane Norton, me for posing, a couple other people. Like he only asks certain people. He doesn't say, tell me about how good I am. He wants to know where his flaws are so he can improve.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So crazy work ethic.
If you guys didn't know, like Jeff's like a master at posing when it comes to bodybuilding. Like it's insane. So there's another thing.
What do you recommend when people are just not mobile?
Yeah, it depends on the pose. Yeah. So we might have to like tweak things individually. It's like usually like lat spreads, like front lat spread, rear lat spread. Some people have a hard time opening up the scap. So, instead of like having your hands on your waist, I'm like, hey, let's just do a front relax and just move your hands in front of you so they can't see. And it looks like a lat spread.
Oh. That's what I kept doing. That's what I had to do. I couldn't like get my arms to like, go through on that.
So like on that, for example, like if he couldn't get his scap to open up, I would say, okay, let's just hide your hands to make it look like it. But yeah, that's Alberto. And now
we mentioned a little bit, going to failure. How important do you feel that is, and how often would someone do that in a given workout or given week or given month even?
I don't think going to failure is like necessary, to be honest with you. I think it's good to know where your boundaries are with that. Like, I think you need to learn to actually go there in order to really truly know, like, okay, where your intensity level should be. Like, if you're never pushing yourself to failure, then how do you know? Like, because you've seen guys in the gym, you're like, they're spinning their wheels. They look the same year after year after year, but you're like, dude, you got like 6 more in the tank. You could keep pushing. So I think it's important to go to failure to learn where your thresholds are at. So you can better gauge, like, if you're 1 rep in reserve, you're 2 or 3 or 4. But I don't think, like, that's a question I've asked, like, Eric Helms, like, hey, what's the difference between if I were to go to failure or I leave 1 in the tank? Like, there's no definitive answer.
But if you leave 1 in the tank.
But what's failure, though? Like, define failure. Like, your definition could be different than mine, might be different than his. So I think failure can be very subjective.
For most of my training, especially like now, I just like when something starts to burn pretty bad, I just do a couple more reps. And a couple more reps could be like 3 or it could be like 8. It kind of just depends. But I think it's very, very rare that I do anything to where it's like just all out, like can't move, can't do. I don't particularly like stuff like that. I think maybe just because of maybe how long I've been training. And then in my head, I'm thinking about the after effects. Like, what's the recovery like from this?
Yeah.
Because I do train pretty much every day. I do some sort of exercise of some type every day. So I don't want to, quote unquote, leave it all in the gym because the gym isn't the only thing that I do. So.
Exactly. Yeah. It's context dependent too on the individual. Like for myself, like I don't need to go to failure as much nowadays. I mean, I'm 50, so the reality is like I'm not going to add 5 pounds of muscle anymore at this point. So I can do less and maintain what I have. And I'm getting to that point now. Like I just had an off season. Like, okay, let me see if I actually put some size on. I don't know if I have or not. It's hard to tell unless I'm extremely lean. But if I had to put all my money on it, I would say I probably haven't. So at this point, I'm starting to come to reality and come to terms like, okay, I don't need to slam myself, every session or maybe every once in a while just to, for ego. Hey, let me have a little fun here. But outside of that, I mean, like, what's the point now? And especially with like he asked earlier, like, do you hurt? Yeah, I hurt. So obviously, if it's harder you train, you're going to hurt more. So yeah, I think it's different. Like if you have someone who's new, I think it's important to press them a little bit.
If you're coaching somebody and it's not for bodybuilding and they're just trying to lose some weight, do you try to put time frames or time domains on it? Because, in bodybuilding, it's like, okay, this show is this time and we got a 16-week prep. Or are you just like, hey, this is a new lifestyle, so we can take however long is necessary to kind of get to the destination?
Double-edged sword there. Because if you're too complacent, oh, it's okay. We still have
6 weeks.
We still have, we could do this 10 months from now or whatever. It's like, then, it gives people excuses to kind of ease off even more. So I think there's a fine line. I think it's important to set up, some structure, timelines. But there should be some flexibility, built within that. And I think setting expectations up front is important. Like if someone has a certain weight loss goal, yeah, we're trying to get to about here. And if you get there, great. If you don't, okay, we can extend it out because there's, like you said, we're not getting on stage, but you got to make sure that, they are following through. Because that's happened for me, even with contest prep. It's like, well, there's always another show next month, and it's like, let me have 3 glasses of wine instead of 2, So yeah, you have to definitely make sure that you're setting up those boundaries there.
Mm-hmm. And when people are, let's say that, again, they're not getting ready for a bodybuilding show, but what mindset should people have when it comes to dieting and trying to lose body fat? Because, a lot of people like to say, oh, diets don't work and 95% of diets fail, but it could potentially be because they're not playing the marathon. They're trying to play the sprint. So what's the mindset that you think people should have if they have a lot of weight to lose? How should they think about it?
That's a good question because, to be honest, I don't work with too much clientele in that area because I work with a lot of athletes. So mentally, they're kind of already they're there. So it's a lot easier. And personally, that's where I thrive, is with working with athletes.
Mm-hmm.
But I think when you're setting up someone's goal or diet, the expectations, but also the protocols, have to be something where that person can actually adhere to it and sustain it. I think a lot of times that coaches, we set up protocol where they just can't be there right then and there, right? You have to be able to set something up where you're going to set them up for a little bit more success. Because anybody that has some game plan in place and if they're failing a little bit, the confidence level is going to go down and you're not going to want to keep doing it. So it can be as simple as hey, we're not tracking any macros, but hey, let's just not have any soda this week.
Mm-hmm.
Something small as that to build confidence. Because it's layers, right? You gotta teach people how to do these things. So I think a lot of times it comes down as a coach, you got to make sure you're setting up, protocols where it fits that person. And usually when I work with someone, the first time it's like a Zoom call, it can last anywhere between an hour to, I've had calls that lasted 2 hours and 45 minutes because I'm dissecting their entire lifestyle, their entire context. You're asking me about protein intake and all that. I'm asking questions I know science says this, but can you do this? Do you digest protein well? Do you get bloated? All these things I'm taking into consideration.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not going to just look at science and go, okay, I need to hit a gram per pound or whatever. I'm well, maybe this person needs half of that because of X, Y, and Z, where I can get the best adherence and best sustainability out of them. And they're actually enjoying what they're doing.
Yeah.
Because if they're not enjoying what they're doing, I don't care how perfect protocol is, you're not going to follow it. You might follow it for a week or two. Then after that, screw Jeff, I'm going to do something else.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on, because I like to make a lot of fun foods in the kitchen, but they'll be extremely high carb, high protein, and extremely low fat, not whole foods, so a lot of artificial sweeteners, protein powders, maybe Greek yogurts and stuff like that. So I'm definitely falling into the, if it fits your macros trap. Done that in the past, and I'm definitely going to do it again in the future because sometimes I'm going to just be stupid in the kitchen. But what are your thoughts on stuff like that? Some of the anabolic diet type stuff where it's just extremely high protein, high carbs, little to no fat, but they're getting in their protein, so it's going to be okay. Is there any issue with macros and micros and that sort of thing?
I think you have to be balanced, right? So I kind of use the general rule of okay, 80%, you want to make sure you're getting your micronutrients, get your fiber in there, get your protein. The other 20%, you want to go have ice cream with your son, not an apple, ice cream. Go do it, because that's another part of longevity, right? Could you imagine eating nothing but high protein diet for 30 years? Maybe you can do it. Maybe there's someone out there that can do it, but I know there's no freaking way I'm going to be able to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So I need my moments where I can be a little human. And to be honest, I don't spend a ton of time going on social media and looking at this type diet, that type diet. I don't even get involved in any of those debates. I'm I'm kind of hey, I post up my training. This is how I kind of do my thing. And maybe someone can learn from it. And then I go away because I got other things to do besides, get into social media debates about artificial sweeteners.
Yeah, you got to be careful with the apples. They're trying to kill you. That's what we learned yesterday.
You personally don't care too much about artificial sweeteners, Crystal Light and Diet Coke and stuff like that.
I don't dive into, like, I'm not educated enough to kind of give an opinion, science-based opinion. I can tell you personal experience, and I can tell you my dad, who's 83 years old, he's been drinking Diet Coke since I've been alive, and he's 83, and he's still going. And
for yourself, like there's probably artificial sweeteners in some of the
I use
protein powders, BCAAs, stuff like that.
I'm like, I have to have my coffee in the morning, so I'll use Equal, there. Diet sodas every once in a while. I'm 50. I'm still doing it, and I've been drinking Diet Pepsi for years.
Yeah.
Personally, I just think we've talked about it many times in this podcast. Whatever can help you control your calories, just. If it makes it that much more miserable to not have a Diet Coke or something like that in your life, or Coke Zero, whatever it is, then just have it. It's like we end up kind of putting everything in a good bad category, and we don't allow any room for anything to be like kind of hovering in the middle. And then also, what about the mental side of things? Like just something just tastes good, something just you just enjoy something, and then so. If you're always sticking to foods that you feel like you kind of have to eat, or it gets monotonous after a while, there's got to be ways to kind of switch things up. For you personally, have you messed around with like really low carb, or, I mean, you must have like manipulated stuff a lot going into shows, and what have you found through that process for yourself?
Like back in the 90s, in that era, I remember playing around with like keto. For shows, let me just go super high protein, decent amount of fat, and literally like very close to zero carbs. Let's just say my training didn't go too well,
right?
And my physique didn't really look all that great, and not to mention, I was grumpy, moody. I was already grumpy and moody as it is dieting, but that was like another layer. So I just didn't find too much positives out of it.
Right.
And it was something definitely I wasn't going to sustain after I'm done with competing for a bodybuilding show.
Did you have similar effects when you just didn't know what you were doing and you were eating too little? Did it feel similar to being on the keto diet?
Felt worse because I mean the training
in
too,
a deficit and no carbs.
Because training like back then, moderate rep ranges, we're talking like 8+. And the higher those reps got, the worse it felt. It was like, fuck, I have no gas here. That's exactly what it kind of felt like.
How about this? Because like I still hear, or I still see a lot of individuals who are choosing to do shows naturally. They're still thinking about, like you've mentioned it a bit, cutting water, cutting sodium. Those things are still within the minds of those athletes. And there's a disconnect when it comes to athletes in the NPC that can do these things with success than athletes that aren't taking anything, and the reason why they can't. So why is it not the best idea to be trying to cut those things when you're actually trying to get lean and get ready for a show if you're not on anything?
Cutting water?
Cutting water and cutting sodium and all those things. Because
muscle's made up of what, 75% water? So, I mean, you start cutting your water back, I mean, you're going to flatten out. You actually could hold more water because the body's like, hey, we're not getting any more. I'm going to hold on to what I got. I've done all that. And to be honest with you, I've cut water where I thought it made my physique look better. But I'm not sure if it was that or was it more carbs I was taking it. Like I had no way to kind of discern what effect I was getting from what.
Yeah.
I can tell you that when Bob Bell introduced me, like, hey, don't cut your water, don't cut your sodium, keep that stuff just normal. If anything, elevate your water just a little bit. I looked a lot fuller and a lot harder.
Yep.
So that was kind of my personal experience with that. So a lot of times when I'm peaking athletes now, I don't adjust the variables too much. If anything, I'm like ahead of like a week or two, let's figure out where your baselines are at. So let's start tracking those things so we know where it's at. And that way we know we head into a peak week. Let's keep all those variables the same. And the only thing we're really manipulating is maybe some carb intake. So you have like one thing that's kind of moving, one moving part, which is easier to interpret like what things are actually doing.
There's no wild peak week magic going on because a lot of athletes last week.
I'll tell you a crazy ass story. So it was before in '99, I was getting ready for the Monterey Bay MPC. And the day before the show, I was laying in the sun, not drinking water. Because in my mind, I'm like, I'm going to lay in the sun, dehydrate myself. I'm going to get hard as shit. And my ex-wife's like, you need to drink water. And she was begging me because she's like, your nose is sinking in. Like I was just like starting to look like Skeletor. And I felt terrible. I did. I felt terrible. So I drank literally on Friday before the show, maybe 6 ounces the entire day. And then I didn't drink anything the next morning. I didn't drink anything until after prejudging was over.
Mm-hmm.
And she was begging me to drink water and I wouldn't do it. And like visually, I thought I looked good because I ended up winning the class. But in hindsight, like looking at photos back then to now, I'm like, oh my gosh, I was just flat as a pancake.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, I had an athlete at the NPC Contra Costa collapse right next to me on stage because he was, doing diuretics, before he was dehydrated and just, we're just standing there and all of a sudden I hear just big crash and he's face planted on the floor.
Mm-hmm.
That was the scariest thing. I was like, fuck. Yeah. I was like, okay, yeah, let's not cut water no more.
What about the ladies? We sometimes hear that women after a show, and I mean, it happens to men too, but it seems to be a little bit more of an issue with some of the female competitors. They get done with a show, they did pretty well, and they just have this crazy rebound. How can people avoid the rebound and like what's going on with some of that, you think?
Oh, the rebound as far as like weight gain and that type of thing. It's hard to say because you have to look at the individual and the approach leading up to the show. Like if it's very invasive, like you're losing weight like quickly, like we talked about earlier, or they've been limited on certain foods, like, hey, you can only eat X food sources and that's it. So it's like putting handcuffs on, and then once the show's over with and that hyper-focused goal is gone, handcuffs come off. Like, oh shit, there's IHOP. There's Burger King, there's the pizza. And, when you're that lean, your body just wants to get fat again. So it's like that's like a storm brewing, And it's like, here's the storm, it hits. So leading up to
Fat
it.
storm.
Yeah, you have to, like, again, having that timeline, pacing it out, like making sure you're conservative, 0.5 to 1% of your body weight per week. That's what you want to lose. Make sure you're inclusive with your food sources. Don't be cutting, like, sodium and all that stuff. Because again, you want to, in a sense, your off season should almost look like what contest prep looks like as far as the approach and how you do things. So that way you're not doing these big up and down swings. So you want to keep that baseline as steady as possible. Of course, once the show's over, you're going to be hungry. You're going to want to eat those things. But my experience and what other bodybuilders have experienced by having that type of approach is like, yeah, you know what? I don't need that double cheeseburger because I just had a low-fat cheeseburger last week and I made it fit. So, that type of thing.
Do you kind of warn some people, like when they're kind of getting into bodybuilding or when they finish their first show, like, hey, man, I know you're going to be super hungry. Enjoy yourself the next couple days, but let's do you kind of give them a base, like, hey, let's try to keep the body weight around here over the next couple of weeks?
So before the show's over, it can be, depending on the athlete, it might be 2 weeks ahead of time, might be 2 months. But first meet up, I'm always like, okay, we're going to have some type of recovery set up for post-show. Because that's where we tend to get in the hot water the most is after the show. And Nsima's looking at me like, yeah, man, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
So yeah, and the last thing I want to do as a coach too before the show is like throw too much of that on them because they're so focused on the show and everything else. So there's a kind of a fine line, but I definitely have a structure set up, and it's going to look different for different people because everybody's lifestyles and things are different. But usually it's like, okay, the next day, yeah, just eat like a normal person. Go eat your IHOP, go eat your Burger King or whatever, get it out of your system. But Monday, hey, here's some parameters that we want to stick with. And this is kind of, okay, this is where we want our body weight, 4 weeks later, 8 weeks later, what have you. Mm-hmm. So there's still some type of structure in place, but obviously it's not going to be as rigid as a contest prep.
Dog, it can get bad. There was a trainer I used to work with back in the day. We worked in the same gym, and he'd do shows every year, but his track record was the same. Every year, post show, he had one bad year where he gained 45 pounds in 3 days. His feet were bloated, his hands were bloated, his face was bloated. Like, the post show rebound for a lot of people can be real. And then the tough thing is, like, it seems as though if you gain the weight back really fast, this is totally anecdotal, but I've just seen it happen quite a few times, that it's usually much harder for those people to lose, especially if they try to lose it too soon. Because a lot of those people, what happens is they'll gain that weight back fast, and they're like, okay, I got to try to drop some of this. But they can't, because their metabolism hasn't caught up to the amount of weight that they've gained.
Well, that too is just like just mentally, you're tapped out, man. If you just spent like the last 6 months of your life dieting, you don't want to jump back into that. So that's when you get these little cycles.
Yeah.
So that's why it's important, you know, to educate people ahead of time before the show's over, to let them know what they can expect. But you got to pay attention to that as a coach. And I think a lot of times as coaches, we're like, oh, show's over. Just forget about that person. But that's where you have to really kind of keep a good eye on them. But we need to gain weight, though.
Yes.
I mean, if you're talking like a male natural bodybuilder, like Brian Whitaker lean, like, you can't stay lean like that. That's not the healthiest thing to do. You got to gain weight. So some people are fearful of gaining weight because they work so hard. They look amazing. They don't want to let that go. But the reality is you have to let that go. And at that point, the goal is, I got to do another show 2 years from now, 3 years from now. Well, you got to get bigger, whatnot. Well, you need food to do that. So you got to learn to eat again. So you don't want to, because the opposite could happen. There's people that try to stay too lean, like reverse dieting. Like, okay, I'm going to add 10, 15 grams of carbs per week. So, all right, bro, here's one rice cake. That's all you get today. Like, you really think people are going to adhere to that? No. So that's why we coined the recovery diet. We need to get your body fat levels back to a normal state, so you're more human, you're functional again, and you can in a sense be a little bit happier at that point. Yeah.
About how much weight do you usually gain? I know you mentioned sometimes you go up as much as 50. Do you?
No, 50 is a little steep. I'd say most of the time I'm anywhere between 30 and 35 over.
That's pretty comfortable.
Yeah, it's not too bad. I mean, I don't know what my body fat percentage is. I have to put a number on it. It's probably like anywhere between 18 and 22 in the off seasons.
For people that want to compete, actually, you mentioned something pretty interesting. You mentioned getting ready for a show 2 to 3 years from now, where a lot of times you see people in NPC and in natural federations trying to compete every single year. Do you think it's actually possible to make good, decent progress if you are competing every single year?
As a natural?
Yeah.
I think you can make progress, but it's not, there's more forms of progress outside of just putting muscle on. If your goal is to put a substantial amount of muscle on, like trying to do it year after year, competing, it's not going to happen. Because it takes anywhere between 1 to 6 months to recover. And then you factor in, okay, now I have like maybe 4 or 5 months to try to put some size on. Yeah. And then you got to diet again. You got to start back to diet. So you're not going to see a whole lot of size gains, like competing every single year. But I mean, you know, someone like myself can probably compete every year. Not that I would want to, because it's not the healthiest thing to do in the world. But there's other forms of progress, meaning like the approach, like, you know, okay, you can get better at dieting. You can be a better person to your family while you're dieting. You improve those skills. You can improve your posing. You can get more conditioned, so you can visually make yourself look like you've made a solid improvements. Yeah. But I don't recommend that. I don't recommend competing every single year.
Yeah. A lot of people get caught in that cycle in bodybuilding and bikini and all that because they're trying to get back to that physique all the time. So they're perpetually competing and they can never let go of that body or dieting.
Well, that's another topic of discussion, right? Like if you're using the sport to try to fulfill like some type of unhappiness, like chances are it's probably not going to happen. Because when you're that lean, I don't care what you look like, you don't feel good. Like, yeah, I look great in those pictures, but I'm not going to walk around like that year round. Yeah, I'd rather walk around at 20% body fat and have a glass of wine with my wife and enjoy life.
Andrew, you got anything else over there, buddy?
No. Well, I mean, I guess for me, an average person, you know, I would like to walk around closer to the 10% than I would the 20%. I guess like what advice do you have for someone like me? Like I'm not training nowhere near as hard as I should be right now. I'm trying to like recoup my back and stuff. My diet's pretty much always in check. I'm never going too far. You know, I guess I'm in a surplus, maybe a maintenance right now. But for me, like if I want to have visual abs year round, what should I be focusing on? Should it be the diet? Should it be the training? My sleep's really good right now. I don't know. I feel like I haven't, again, I have to check myself because I'm looking for progress, even though I'm not working for it right now. I know that, but I just feel like my progress hasn't really changed too much over the past, say, 2 years. What do you think I'm missing on right now?
When you say progress, what do you define progress?
I guess, yeah, thank you for asking that. My body fat percentage, it's usually always going to be somewhere around 18 to 22%, regardless of what I'm eating, unless I do go on strict cut, but then I get kind of stringy. I don't really, I don't know. In my opinion, I think like I still need to gain a little bit more size. And I think, and Mark, please jump in wherever you feel necessary, because these two guys have a better grasp on my body than I do most of the time.
So what I hear is you got low back issues.
Yeah.
You want to be leaner.
Right.
And you want to be bigger.
Yeah.
So you put those things in priority. It's like, okay, getting healthy is probably the main priority. So you probably don't want to be in a deficit while you're trying to get back to full health. Because obviously it's harder to do that when you're in deficit. Once you got that cured, then my thought is, well, if you diet after that point, like you're healthy, you get leaner, you're probably going to say, well, I need more muscle, and then you're going to have to go the other way anyways. So it's like once you work on the foundation, getting a little more muscle, a little size, then diet down. That would be my thought.
That makes sense
on the 2-minute conversation.
I know, right?
If you were like a client, like we would be on a call for like hour and a half, 2 hours, like just dissecting everything. But
yeah. No, I just had to get it out there because it was in the back of my head.
That would be my thoughts.
Fired off.
But I have a question too, man.
What's
like looking at you training over the years. I mean, you've trained, but how long do you think you've been consistently doing not even one type of training, but like a program that was progressive? How long have you stuck with that consistently?
I mean, yeah, it hasn't been that long. No, I couldn't even say a year, because I've always, whether it's powerlifting or I'll do like a bodybuilding thing with Mark or like with biomechanics, like it's been altered. I would say I've been consistent, but not on the same progressive, type of program. No.
So if the goal is to put some more muscle on, like you haven't been consistent with like hypertrophy type training, in a fed state, like crossing all your T's, dotting your I's, like making sure you're eating enough to support the training,
right?
Make sure protein is there, sleep's on point. Like actually, like he was kind of saying, like
across the board, no, not consistent.
Because you can change the way you look through weight training, even if your body fat percentage stays the same. Let's say in the next year or two, and you just focus on being progressive. You're going to change the way you look. Like, even though you're the same level of leanness, you'll look probably leaner because you're holding more muscle.
Yeah. And the question was spurred up because of this post right here, where I think you're saying you're around the same body fat percentage throughout each picture. Pretty
much. Yeah. It's pretty close to the same body fat percentages across all three. Maybe, 2-3 maybe percent hair, but I mean, it's pretty similar.
I don't have enough. I don't have any hair pictures anyways. I've been bald for a long time.
Those are great haircuts, by the way, right there.
Oh yeah, look at that.
That was like, because I had a mullet in high school, man, because that was a thing back then. Yeah, and I would hair blow it and all that, but and then it was like I graduated high school and I was like letting go, like changing styles. So I'm like, let me do this flat top, but I didn't want to let go of the mullet, so you still kind of see it in the back there.
Little rat tail.
Yeah. And then to the right, it's like, I don't have any hair, so let's just wear a beanie to cover it up. Yep.
Yeah. Perpetual hats.
That's
how we rock.
Yeah. And then did you grow up in NorCal area?
Yeah, Bay Area.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Oh yeah. Awesome. That answers me, which I just need somebody to tell me, like, be more consistent.
Andrew, want to take us on out of here, buddy?
All right. Thank you, everybody, for checking out today's episode. Please make sure you guys like today's video and drop us a comment down below on anything you found interesting. Let us know your natty status. I want to see your guys' natty cards. And make sure you guys subscribe to the YouTube channel and follow the podcast at MB Power Project on Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter. My Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter is at I am Andrew Z. Nsima, where you at?
The Discord is also popping, and we're going to be killing it on Reddit. And answer this, guys. Do you guys think Jeff is natty or not? I'm at Nsima Yang on Instagram and YouTube. At Nsima Yin Yang on TikTok and Twitter. Jeff, where can you find you and where can you find 3DMJ?
3dmusclejourney.com and 3DMJ Godfather on Instagram.
That slingshot thingy that you drove here was amazing.
Yes, I love that. Man,
Midlife
How'd
crisis.
you guys like it? You guys got to cruise around?
go ahead, Nsima.
Dog, it was exciting as hell. Yeah. Like once he sped up, he just put his foot on the gas. And I couldn't, and I just had to laugh because since you're so close to the ground, it feels wild.
Yeah, no, I haven't felt that like pushed back in my seat. I don't know, over 10 years.
Have you been in Mark's Tesla? Because that kind of does that too. When it
No, absolutely. Yeah, so I've driven Mark's car, so maybe that's part of why I didn't feel that. But I also didn't didn't
floor
gun it. But I've wanted one of those slingshots since the first day I saw one. You know, I've been in motorsports for a couple years. Although I've been away from it for even longer now. But like, dude, like I had, a pretty beefy engine in my little 240. I had the JDM swap, so it had a turbo. So that was the last time that I had gotten in anything where I was like, yuck, and it just throws you way back in your seat. Feeling that was fucking awesome, super inspiring. So I really appreciate that little joyride.
You're welcome, man. It's not natty, I'll tell you that.
Yeah, no, that shit was dope. I can't wait to get my own or steal yours or something.
No, hide the keys.
There you go.
You got it for your 50th birthday?
I did, and that was my midlife crisis right there.
Perfect.
Awesome, man.
Good call.
It's a beautiful looking car.
It is.
Strength is never weakness. Weakness is never strength. I'm at Mark Smelly Bell. Catch you guys later.